Welcome to Tennessee's at-home learning series for literacy. Today's lesson is for 8th grade students, although anyone's welcome to tune in. This lesson is the 4th in this week's series. My name is Mr. Ayers, and I'm an 8th grade teacher in Tennessee schools. I am so excited to be your teacher for this lesson. Welcome to my virtual classroom. If you didn't see our previous lessons, you can find them at tn.gov/education/pbsteaching.html. That's a lot. Let me say that again. tn.gov/education/pbsteaching.html. You can still tune in to today's lesson if you haven't seen any of our others, but it might be more fun if you go back and watch our others lessons, since today we'll be talking about things we've learned previously. Today we will continue learning about real-life body snatchers. Before we get started, to participate in our lesson today, you will need paper, pencil, a surface to write on, and if you can download and print the student packet for ELA Grade 8 Lesson 13, that would be awesome. You don't have to have it, but it would be helpful. All right, are you ready? Let's begin. Today, our goal is to read the informational text called Top 10 Real-Life Body Snatchers so that we can analyze the information to the text and determine its meaning. We'll begin with me reading a portion of the text, and then we'll dig back into it for deeper understanding. At the end of the lesson, I will assign you independent work that you can complete after the video ends. Speaking of which, if you tuned into our previous lesson, you may have completed the independent work assigned at the end of the lesson. Do you remember it? We asked you to write a brief essay comparing and contrasting the parasitic relationships we discussed, the wasp and the spider, and the other type of wasp and a caterpillar. Take a moment and reread what you wrote. All right, how did you do? Does your writing help you remember key details from the previous lesson? I hope you explained how similarities and differences between the two parasitic relationships. You may have used your Venn diagram to explain that something the two relationships had in common was they involved chemicals and laying eggs. You could have said that both hosts die after they are infected with the parasite. You may also have said that in both cases, the wasp parasite controls its host behavior, but with the spider, the wasp parasite causes it to spin a special type of web, while with the caterpillar, the wasp parasite causes it to swing its head around and scare off predators. There were other differences too. For example, the first wasp attached its egg to the spider belly, but with the caterpillar, the wasp eggs are actually inside its body. If you didn't tune into the previous lesson and none of that makes sense to you, don't worry, we're going to learn about a different parasite today. Now, let's dig into the informational text that we're going to be studying. Remember, it's the article about body snatchers. As a reminder, historically, people were called body snatchers when they stole dead bodies from graves in order to study or sell them. But these aren't the type of body snatchers we'll be reading about. We're going to read about certain types of parasites or living things that survive by using or hunting other living things that we call hosts. As a reminder, we'll be hearing a lot of scientific names in this text. Don't worry about understanding or remembering them. Just know they're names scientists use to refer to different species. I'll be clear about what we're referring to. The text we are studying has a number of different sections. One section on each real-life body snatcher or parasite. Today, we'll study in depth 2 of the sections. As a reminder from yesterday, we will use the information we learned today to complete the Venn diagram on the article. Here is what the diagram looks like. Okay, so this Venn diagram shows some of the things parasites do when they infect their host. Some change body features. Some use chemicals and venoms. Some lay eggs in their host. And many do a combination of 2 or even all 3 of these things. As we continue to read about different parasites this week, we're going to be sorting them into the various sections of this Venn diagram. For example, if we read about a parasite that uses venom and changes body features, but does not lay eggs, we'll put it in the upper left section where the circles overlap, showing that it is in the chemicals and venoms and changing body circles, but not in the laying egg circles. If we read about a parasite that changes body features, uses chemicals or venoms, and lay eggs, we'd write its name right in the center, showing that it does all 3. Don't worry about this just yet, though. We'll complete this exercise further into the lesson. So, if you don't have this diagram, if you could, go ahead and draw this on a piece of paper. If you do have the Venn diagram, make sure you have it out and ready to use in the lesson. So, let's begin the text. I'll begin by reading a section of the text about parasites and their host. We will then reread each section and analyze it at a deeper level. As I read the text, please take notes on your paper. Try to focus on the relationship between each parasite and its host, and write down key details about them. Okay, are you ready? Let's get reading. Sacculina carcini, a parasitic barnacle, Sacculina carcini, invades crabs and turns them into surrogate mothers. In the larval stage, female Sacculini swimming in seawater are able to sniff out crabs. Okay, so let's pause for a second. So we know that the parasite is a barnacle. Do you know what a barnacle is? So a barnacle is a small sea creature with a shell that usually hangs out on rocks or on the bottoms of boats. The host for the barnacle is a crab. We also know that barnacles are invading crabs to turn them into their surrogate mothers. Well, what in the world does that mean? Any ideas? All right, so let's keep reading. A surrogate mother is basically a female that bears a child on behalf of another female. In the larval stage, these female barnacles swimming in seawater are able to sniff out crabs. Okay, so a surrogate mother is a female that serves as a mom on behalf of another female. So we now know the barnacle strategy to find a substitute mom. Why would the barnacle need a substitute mom? Right, because that's what parasites do. They use their host to do things like eat, reproduce, and more. Notice that the text also says that in the larval stage, when they're young, the female barnacles that swim around in seawater are able to smell around to find the crabs. Let's see why they're smelling around for them. They tend to latch onto European green crabs, an invasive species native to the northeast coast, northeast Atlantic. Once the parasite lands on a crab, it makes its way to a joint in the crustacean's or the crab's exoskeleton. So the barnacles smell around and find the European green crabs. Once they find them, they search around on a crab's exoskeleton to find a joint. Why do you think it went to the joint of the exoskeleton? You may remember that while we humans have skeletons on our insides, some living things have skeletons on their outsides, and those are called exoskeletons. So why do you think it looks for that joint on the exoskeleton? Take about 30 seconds to think through that and jot down a note on your paper. Okay, so let's think about that. The exoskeleton is hard and impenetrable, which means you can't go through it. So the parasite has to find a joint, an area where the crab may be vulnerable or where it has fewer defenses. Let's see how it gets inside. The barnacle sheds a good portion of its body and, slim as a slug, slips into the hole at the base of one of the crab's hairs. The parasite travels to the tail end of the crab where it camps out. So there is nothing about that situation that seems appealing to me. But let's make sure we understand it because there's more to the story. After the parasite gets through the joint in the crab's exoskeleton, it sheds off parts of its body and then slips into a hole at the base of one of the crab's hairs. That is tiny. Then, for whatever reason, it decides that the tail end is the best place to stay inside that crab. I think I would have chosen a different option if it was me. But let's see what the barnacle has in mind. The saculina, or parasitic barnacle, grow tendrils that wrap like vines around the inside of the crab, and it pilfers or steals nutrients from the crab's blood. If a male barnacle locates the bulge on the crab's underside where the female resides, he too squeezes in and fertilizes the female's eggs. Okay, that just got a whole lot grosser. The barnacle now grows tendrils, or long thread-like arms that wrap around and latch onto the crab. It then takes the crab's blood and uses it for food. So we know for sure one reason why the barnacle is in there: food. But the text also says that the male barnacle locates a spot on the crab's underside where the female is hanging out. The barnacle then fertilizes the female's eggs. So how is this going to work? Let's keep reading. Crabs infected from saculina are essentially sterilized by it. But since the parasite's eggs sit in the same place where the crab would carry an egg pouch, the crab cares for them as if they were its own. So I'm tracking this myself and taking some notes. In my notes, I wrote down that the parasite lays egg in the same place inside the crab that the mother crab normally would lay eggs. But the mother crab can't lay eggs now because she sterilized them. So what does sterilized mean? Right, she is not able to lay eggs due to the parasite being inside of her. But she really does not know what's going on, so she takes care of the parasite's eggs as if they were her own. Okay, now that's a pretty neat trick, or mean trick. I'm not sure which way to look at it. The parasite is using the crab not only for food, but also to reproduce. Let's learn more about it. Even if the crab is a male, it takes on the maternal role. When the larvae or young barnacle have developed enough to exist on their own, the crab goes to a high rock where it bobs up and down as it pushes the Sacculina larvae out. Okay, so that is just crazy. Even if the host crab is a male, it takes on a maternal role. What does maternal role mean? Think about that and write down your thought on your notes. Yep. So maternal means like a mother, or even the male thinks it's a mother when the parasite is inside of it. The text also says that when the barnacle larvae have developed enough to be on their own, the crab goes to a high rock, does a dance, and pushes the larvae out. Let's keep reading. The crab flails its claws in the water to spread the parasite as it would its own young. So, this helps the parasitic barnacle too. The crab flails or waves its claws in the water to spread the parasite, as if it would do for its own babies. This is all just hard to believe. So let's go through the text one more time and make sure we have all of this in our notes, as we will need this information to complete the Venn diagram. So have your notes ready. Make sure if you've already taken some, make sure you have things in. If you need to add to, add to. Sacculina carcini. This is a barnacle, a small sea creature with a shell that sticks very tightly and in large numbers to rocks in the bottom of boats. But this particular barnacle is a parasitic barnacle. It invades crabs and turns them into surrogate mothers. A surrogate mother is basically a female that bears a child on behalf of another female. In the larval stage, these female barnacles swimming in seawater are able to sniff out crabs. They tend to latch onto European green crabs, an invasive species native to the Northeast Atlantic. So take a second to look in your notes. And here's what I have in mind. A parasitic barnacle invades crabs to turn them into surrogate mothers. A surrogate mother is basically a substitute mom. In the larval stage, the female barnacles swimming around in seawater use their sense of smell to locate crabs. All right, let's read a bit more. Once the parasite lands on a crab, it makes its way to a joint in the crustaceans or the crab's exoskeleton. The barnacle sheds a good portion of its body and, slim as a slug, slips into the hole at the base of one of the crab's hairs. So the parasite finds the crab, finds its way to a joint on the exoskeleton. It says that the barnacle sheds a good portion of the body and, slim as a slug, slips into the hole at the base of the crab's hairs. Notice that the phrase slim as a slug. Let's take a second from the gross stuff and let's think about what the author is doing here. Do you know what the name of that particular figure of speech is, slim as a slug? Yes, a simile. Remember that a simile is a figure of speech that directly compares two unlike things using the words like or as. For what purpose do you think the author used a simile here? Take a minute and write your answer on your paper. So the main purpose of a simile is to help us to understand something better. We can visualize or see it better. In this case, it helps us to see that after the barnacle sheds a good portion of its body, it becomes very thin and slick, like a slug. That is how the barnacle is able to slip into the hole at the base of one of the crab's hairs. Now, interesting enough, the phrase slim as a slug is an example of another literary device or tool used by authors. Do you know what that one is called? That one's a little bit tougher sometimes to remember the word. It's called an alliteration. This is basically when an author uses words closely together that have the same initial consonant sound. The S sound at the beginning of slim and slug is an example of a trick of sorts the author uses. It's similar to why authors use rhyming. It sounds cool and the words roll off the tongue in a certain way to keep you interested. A lot of musicians use the same trick in songs. They just may not call it alliteration. Okay, so now back to the crazy story of the barnacles and the crab. We know that the barnacle, being slim as a slug, snuck into the crab. Let's keep reading to remind ourselves what happens next. Make sure you keep adding to your notes. The parasite travels to the tail end of the crab where it camps out. The saculina, or parasitic barnacle, grows tendrils that wrap like vines around the inside of the crab, and it pilfers or steals nutrients from the crab's blood. If a male barnacle locates the bulge on the crab's underside where the female resides, he too squeezes in and fertilizes the female's eggs. So here's what I have in my notes. Now that the barnacle has invaded the crab, it travels to the tail of the crab. There it grows tendrils or thread-like arms that wrap around the inside of the crab and steals its blood. If there happens to be a male barnacle, it finds the spot on the crab's underside where the female is camped out and fertilizes the female's eggs. Make sure you add to your notes if you need to. Okay, so while it's fresh in our memory, let's look at our Venn diagram. Now, I know you don't have the text in front of you, but I want you to think and look at your notes and think about the parasitic relationship of the barnacle and the crab. Take a second and think about where it's going to go on this diagram. Okay, I'll show you where I put this, and let's see if it matches up with your thoughts. I put barnacle and crab in the laying eggs. I wrote that the parasitic barnacle invades the crabs and lay eggs where the crab would carry an egg pouch. So the crab cares for and births the larvae. Did you have that in your diagram? If not, take a second. You can change it if you need to. All right, keep it handy. We'll come back to this. Now, let's read about the next parasitic relationship, one between a thorny-headed worm and a crustacean. Remember that a crustacean is any type of animal that lives in the water and has a hard shell and many legs. A crab is an example of a crustacean. Polymorphous paradoxus. Pond and river dwelling crustaceans called Gammarus lacustris typically dart deep into the water, away from the light when ducks are at the surface. But when the crustaceans are infected with polymorphous paradoxus, a type of thorny-headed worm, they practically throw themselves at their predators. So this parasitic relationship involves a thorny-headed worm and a crustacean. It says that the crustaceans typically go deep in the water away from the light to stay away from predators like ducks that want to eat them. It's hard to think of a duck as a predator, but to a crustacean, it definitely is. The odd part is that when the crustaceans are infected with a parasite, they start acting weird. Let's see what they do. Oddly attracted to light, the parasitized crustacean swims to the surface and clings to a rock or plant. There, fully exposed, the crustacean is more likely to get eaten by a duck. Clearly, this is not normal behavior on the crustacean's part. Instead of going away from light like it normally does, the parasite makes the crustacean swim toward light and cling to a rock or a plant. They are now fully exposed to predators. Remember from the lesson earlier this week that exposed means you're out in the open. So the crustaceans are in full view of the hungry duck. Also, again, we as humans think of ducks as cute and friendly, but when you're a crustacean, they want to eat you. I can't think of a circumstance where being eaten is good. But this parasite disagrees. Let's see why. Inside a duck is exactly where the parasite needs to be to reach adulthood. The clinging position of the crab on the rock is the same one that the male crustacean takes while mating. Scientists speculate that this parasite increases serotonin or hormone levels in the crustacean, perhaps making it think it's mating. So apparently this particular parasite needs to be inside a duck in order to reach adulthood. The short passage does not explain the reasons why, but we'll trust that the scientists know what they're talking about. Now, there is one other interesting piece of information we learned from these sentences. Apparently, when the infected crustacean goes up to sit on a rock, it makes the same movement that it would make as if it was mating. How does the parasite get the crustacean to do that? Right. The passage says it increases the serotonin levels in the crustacean, which makes the crustacean think it's mating. But still, I wonder why would the parasite make the crustacean do that? I think the fact that the crustacean is making a lot of movement on the rock makes it a lot more likely that the duck will easily spot it and choose it for its dinner. It's all part of the parasite's plan to get inside the duck. So take a second to catch up on your notes. Great. I hope you've enjoyed learning about another interesting parasitic relationship today. Let's take a look at what we've learned and add to that Venn diagram. All right, so now let's think about that section that we just read, the thorny-headed worm and the crustacean. Take a moment to look at your notes and think about that information and think about where you would place it on our diagram. Okay, so I'll show you where I added it. I put it in the chemicals and venom circle. I wrote that the parasite worm increases serotonin or hormone levels in the crustacean to make it feel like it's mating instead of preparing to get eaten by the duck. Is that where you had it? If not, you can change it. Okay, that's all I'm adding today. I look forward to learning more about these tomorrow, so I'm going to add more to my diagram. Make sure you hold on to this. All right, so let's reflect on today's lesson. Today we learned about some parasites and the creative ways that they take advantage of their host. For your independent work, please respond in writing to the following prompt in a brief essay. Compare and contrast the parasitic relationships we discussed today. What are the similarities between the barnacle and the crab relationship and the thorny-headed worm and the crustacean relationship? What are the important differences between them? Be sure to use specific details from your notes to support your answers. Awesome. So we learned a lot again today. I really enjoyed working on the Body Snatchers information text with you. Thank you for inviting me into your home. I look forward to seeing you in our next lesson in Tennessee's At Home Learning Series. Goodbye.